Bang.
All
Welcome
right.
back, folks. Pete and I are both in New York City today. We're going to be on the Liz Clayman Show at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and you are tuned into The Rebel's Edge, where today we're going to cover some unusual activity and some very strange activity in treasuries that's been going on ever since the Fed cut in September. Stay tuned for answers to all of these questions and more on today's Rebel's Edge. Bang. Great to be with you here in New York, Pete.
Yep. First time in well over 4 years, John, that I've been in the state of New York, the city of New York City. And it's great to be here, actually. It's beautiful. It's everything I remembered and more. I love it out here. And I'll tell you, we got ourselves a beautiful day in front of us as well.
Beautiful blue skies, folks. Pete and I had a nice breakfast with our friends at the Lexington Candy Shop, which these days is pretty much a landmark here in New York, Pete, not only because it's been around for 80 plus years, but also because people come from around the world for their milkshakes of all things and their sodas, because they make the Coca-Cola a slightly different way than a lot of people, and it's extremely popular. Mm-hmm. So lines around the block, but not for Pete and John, luckily. Bang. All right, let's dive right into the macro minute, Pete. And much like we're going to talk about with Liz Clayman on the Fox Business Network at 3 p.m., I'm going to say Treasury's highest yield since July, 4.23%. Why are they moving up like this? Could have something to do with the superstorms, I think, Pete. But the fact that we're up nearly 75 bips from the time the Fed actually cut by 50 bips, wow, that's my macro today.
Yeah, I got to follow you right in there, John. I mean, if there's anything that's influencing the markets right now, it's got to be the 10-year. It's been going up, and without anything in sight of any slowing or stopping. And that's certainly been something of an issue that we're dealing with. And the markets have actually played along pretty nicely. But at some point, today might be that day, it's not going to bounce back. I don't know when that actually comes, but it's been incredible how resilient the markets have been towards the latter part of the day. But this 10-year, I think, is very concerning and about as macro as it gets, I'd say.
Well, let's dive into fantastic futures, Pete. And as we do, folks, we're going to let you know a little bit about, of course, one of the ways to own gold and silver that Pete and I love, which is, of course, Hard Assets Alliance. That's assets plural, Hard Assets Alliance. There's the code you can scan. We are paid to help promote them. That's why they're sponsoring the fantastic futures. But it's also a great way, if you agree with us, that there's uncertainty, both about election outcomes as well as what the Fed will do next. Well, gold and Bitcoin tend to do very well in those uncertain times. So by scanning that code there, you could avail yourself of, well, a provider that sells both gold and silver. They buy and sell both gold and silver, by the way, folks. And they will take, much like these police cars running outside our apartment here in New York, they will protect your gold and silver. If you don't want to hold it in your home, they will put it in a Brinks.
They're going today, man.
They'll put it in a Brinks vault for you. So make sure you check out hardassets.alliance.com. It's a great way for you to buy and sell gold. You've got 10 different dealers, not just one person as when you wander into a numismatic store or something like that. It is really, I think, a great way to own and or to trade out of. If you bought gold at $800 an ounce and you want to take some profits at $2,700, well, Hard Assets Alliance will also do that. Just scan the code. You can see all about it. Mm-hmm. All right, Pete. Today, I'm going to say for my fantastic future, it is the British pound. Why? Well, one of the ways, folks, that we measure how well Vice President Harris or former President Trump are doing is by the stocks and or assets that will react to a positive Trump or a positive Harris. Well, right now, the big hedge funds are pouring money into the US dollar, which is putting downward pressure on the British pound. It was $1.35 back in September when Ms. Harris was leading in the polls. With her now at her lowest point in the polls, the British pound is at its lowest point as well, because people perceive, and these are hedge funds, billion-dollar hedge funds, perceive that President Trump is all but elected. And for that reason, the British pound and a bunch of other foreign currencies, including the peso, hitting their lowest level in a long time. What do you got, Pete?
I got to go right there to my mainstay, John. I'm going to go right at the volatility index, the VIX itself. Now, the CBOE VIX is interesting because even though we've got markets that are under a pretty good amount of pressure this morning, as a matter of fact, the NASDAQ down about 1%, couple hundred points. You've also got the Dow down significantly. And then all of a sudden you look over at the S&P, it's down about 40 points or thereabouts. But all that being said, volatility did get up and over 19 for a moment, and then it pulled right back down again. And the fact that we are in the 18s and kind of holding there, John, it kind of does explain a little bit about where the markets are, how people are feeling about the market right now. And it certainly is interesting that it's not spiked as much as maybe into the 20s. I could have very easily said, well, you got the Dow down 300, and you got the S&P down 40, and you've got the NASDAQ down 200 points or thereabouts. Where is the volatility going to be? I'd say, well, it's probably north of 20. It's not. That shows you just how much you can read into what the volatility is telling us about the markets right now, which is, call it 1880, somewhere in there. And I think that says a lot about there's still confidence in the markets right now.
Yeah, and that confidence is, I think, deserved, Pete. I mean, the market has weathered a lot and has come back swinging. And now it's just a question of getting through the election, which is 13 days away. Because here it is, Wednesday, the 23rd, and we all know the election was 2 weeks from yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. All right, Pete, let's talk about stocks, and I'm going to tie two of these stocks together, more or less. And the first one is Coca-Cola, because they posted better than expected Q3 report driven by higher prices. Now, when you're able to get higher prices for your product and you're a company, that's good. When you're a consumer, it ain't good. But now you have to worry about them and McDonald's, which Pete and I will cover in just a few. But McDonald's is the largest seller of Coke in the world, Pete. Nobody sells more Coca-Cola products than McDonald's does. But their volumes have been soft, Coca-Cola's volumes, that is, but the prices are higher. So adjusted earnings, yeah, they beat, and they beat on revenue as well. But the volumes being soft, that may tell you a little bit more about the consumer, Pete, and how perhaps the consumer is moving away from Coke, at least in the short term.
It's a possibility for sure, John. I mean, certainly they've lightened up. I mean, that part is obvious for us. They talked about the volumes being a little bit softer, but the price mix actually helping out to some degree. Now, they did, as you pointed out, they beat on the earnings. They beat on the revenue. They had a very nice report from that perspective. The other thing is, this stock has been on a really nice move this past year, John. Year to date, it's really had an incredible run. You look at the PE trading at about a 22 right now. Their free cash flow of about $11.7 billion. This is still a juggernaut. I like this company. I think they've really done well. When you look at the charts, you're going to look at a chart that you'd probably be surprised about how much the gains are right now this year for this company. So a little bit of a pullback today just because of the fact that the volumes were light. But I think they can survive this. I think they can continue to make a nice move actually still towards the end of the year, closer to that 52-week high, which they're not far from right now.
Yeah, it's definitely, Pete, a situation where Coca-Cola, it's not just on Coke and their distributors, it's on their biggest buyer, which is McDonald's. And if McDonald's is having problems, and again, we're going to cover that in just a sec, folks, that's a problem for Coke. Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about Qualcomm, because similarly, it's not their problem. It's a problem with one of the people that they license architecture for semiconductors from, which is ARM Holdings, Pete. So ARM Holdings has said basically that they're going to cancel their architectural license agreement with Qualcomm. Now, is this just posturing so that they can get a better deal? Perhaps. It's got a 60-day clause in it, Pete, but nonetheless, this is something that is driving Qualcomm to the downside at a time when many of their peers are moving to the upside. So one of the things to sort of understand is when you've got an extremely large customer like McDonald's, in the case of Coke, that's a problem. ARM Holdings is a problem for Qualcomm as well.
Yeah, the implications, the cancelization of what's going on with ARM, that's going to be complicated, John. And by the way, Qualcomm is a name that really, from a performance standpoint, they don't stand anywhere near the world of NVIDIA and many of the names that we talk about each and every day when we talk about something within the semiconductor community. This is a stock that is way off the 52-week highs. It's not that close to the 52-week lows, but when you look at the year-to-date performance, it's just not there. So even today, John, despite the fact that this is very negative news, they've bounced a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit off of the lows. And it's interesting to see where it stands right now. But to look at that chart like we are right now, this does not look like what we've seen throughout most of what we've been talking about with AI and data centers and all the different names that are out there, from AMD to NVIDIA to Micron and all these names. This name just has not really performed to the same degree as the rest.
You know, like I said, it's not all in your hands if you're either of these first two companies we've talked about. Mm-hmm. Qualcomm, which needs those licensing agreements from ARM Holdings, or whether it's McDonald's and Coca-Cola. But now we'll get into a slightly different area, Pete. I mentioned at the top of the show that some of these trades have a pretty significant impact from the presidential election. Now, green energy, I think most of us would say we'd love it if the country had more green energy, but we can't do it all at once. We have proved that over the last 4 years for sure, that you have to do it. You know, I'm not saying baby steps, but you have to have infrastructure to be able to handle it. And one stock in the clean energy space that would be a Kamala Harris sort of rallying cry if she was doing well would be Enphase. Because what do? They take power from wind, power from solar, and turn it into electricity. That's a great thing. And obviously, they should be doing really well, in particular if Kamala Harris was doing well. But again, in her polling numbers, she is not doing well. This stock is tanking under sharp pressure. Net income, 45.8 million, a decline from 114 million, Pete, year over year. So this is not a good report out of Enphase, ENPH, and that's why shares are trading to the downside hard. I'm looking at 13 million share turnover, Pete. That's a full day already, and a lot of people heading for the sidelines in this one.
Understandably so, John. I could not find, oftentimes you've heard me say, I can't find anything bad about this report. I can't find anything good about this report with Enphase. That income decline that you talked about is absolutely something like I have never seen before. They disappointed on everything as far as Q3 is concerned. Their guidance is also something that did not come close to the expectations. The growth has completely collapsed, and the stock is very close to 52-week lows. The 52-week lows are 73. Last I looked, the stock was somewhere between 78, 79, somewhere in that category. But 141 was the 52-week high. There's a lot to be said for how big of a miss this is, and all of it makes sense. This isn't one that's a head scratcher. It makes sense. They just aren't able to do things efficiently enough, to your point, to actually survive the way they need to. And the problem is that this is something that there's been a focus on. Everybody's talked about it. Can we do it with solar? Can we do it with wind? Someday, but that's not today. And that's the problem right now, I think, for Enphase.
Yeah, and by the way, folks, we had unusual activity in this name. Take a look at this. The stock was $100 a share. Like Pete said, 52-week high is 140. But at 100, somebody steps in and says, you know what? I want 210,000 share equivalent of a short position until the 8th of November. They bought those 99 puts. Well, those puts, the right to sell it at $99 when it goes to 79, I bet most of you can do that math. They went to $20+ per option. So you want some trades like that? Come on over to marketrebellion.com/get started. You could be trading exactly like Pete and I do on these trades, because there's some tremendous opportunity. Pete and I were just talking about it on a podcast. I have never seen more action, Pete, in the heat seeker algorithm that you and I employ than we're seeing right now. Yeah. So Enphase, just one of many examples, and we get it on the put side, which I just described, Enphase, puts, downside bet, or on the call side, upside bets. All right, Pete, let's hit McDonald's real quick, because, when Chipotle was having problems with cleanliness, or with, some of the salads they were serving having, not been cleaned properly, perhaps, or even the supplier not doing a good job bringing them the right lettuce, that was a problem. Well, McDonald's has an E. coli problem as well. And we've already tied this in with Coke, even though this just happened. So it wasn't part of the Coke issue right now for this report, but it is a guidance issue, because McDonald's is falling, 5-6% today, Pete. That's not good news if you're a shareholder there. 49 individuals in 10 different states. So this is not just one company sending them bad, whatever it is, meat, lettuce, pickles, whatever it might be. This is E. coli, and one person's already dead because of it. So it's a black eye for McDonald's. It's horrible for the family that suffered that loss, and it's hurting the stock of McDonald's MCD as well.
And the stock was down over 10% last night, John. It's down about 5% today, so it's definitely improved. It opened the day closer to 290. Now it's closer to 297. So it has taken a nice lift off of the lows. And I guess it just is going to come down to, how bad is it? Are they able to get after it quick enough? And those are the questions we don't have the answers to, but that's really what's been crushing McDonald's. When you look at this company, John, it was a $300 stock in January. It's very close to $300 now. July, it was $250. Then it was $314 just a day or so ago. And here we are, we find ourselves at $295. So the stock, actually, you would have expected to see it get hit far harder. I expected that 10% to maybe move up to maybe 14, 15% to the downside, John. So maybe, just maybe, folks are thinking, this is very, very small. This isn't going to continue to go out further. And under those circumstances, you could understand why people would be stepping in. But I will tell you this, this is a stock that if it did stretch out anything close to what Chipotle did, this thing is not the stock that you'd want to be buying right now. And I would just suggest that if somebody really feels that they've got to buy this thing at this point in time, you know what? Buy some insurance policy on it. Get some puts along the way as well, because this could be a very bumpy ride, and we don't know what the time frame is going to be for McDonald's and how this is going to be resolved. And it's going to be potentially financially a pretty big deal, I would say.
Yeah, I love Jared's headline for this one, Pete. McBarf.
Oh, terrible.
Again, I just think this is, when you're serving food, you got to make sure things are clean, that the product is what the people came in for. And obviously nobody came into McDonald's for an E. coli outbreak like they're experiencing right now. I agree with you. I would step away. A 10 or a 15% decline, okay, but a 4 or 5% decline, not enough to address this problem, Pete.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's take a look at a little, yesterday we talked about that kicker who did such a great job. Pressure was on, Pete. This is a kid who was a soccer player. And then he decided, you know what? I'm going to be a football player. So he played soccer in college. Then he went on to play football in college, and he was a kicker. And you know what? He never missed. And then he went on into the UFL because he was signed by the Texans last year. Well, let the video tell you more about it. This is NFL on Fox describing this great story.
And it'll set the stage for Jake Bates, who was a soccer player at Central Arkansas and then became a kickoff specialist at Texas State and Arkansas, was signed as an undrafted free agent by the Houston Texans last year, released during the preseason, and then made his name in the UFL with those booming 60-yard kicks, hit 3 of them, including a game-winning 64-yarder at Ford Field against the St. Louis Battlehawks. To that point, he had only attempted and missed one kick in an organized game. That was all the way back in high school.
That's amazing.
Incredible story. He went 21 of 28 in the UFL, earned a 2-year deal after Michael Badgley tore his hamstring in July.
Actually,
he's hit a game-tying 32-yarder against the Rams late in the fourth quarter.
And here he is against the Vikings
in his NFL career. But this
game
one,
on the line,
the most weighty kick of his life. For the lead, Bates has delivered. Detroit is on top with 15 seconds left.
Oh, that is so awesome, John. That really is. That's phenomenal.
It's so cool when you see a guy or gal that gets their moment and then takes advantage. And I think he'll have a lot more moments like that, Pete. Yep. He won't only have one miss in his career, but he will also be known as a guy with a huge booming leg. And you're hitting from 64 yards out. I think teams will sign this guy if Detroit ever let him go.
This guy's the young version of that kid Tucker at Baltimore, where all he does is make field goals from 50, 60. It doesn't matter. They still nail it. The kid is special. All right, John, we're going to jump into the NFL. We just had that clip of the NFL, but I just wanted to bring this up. We are at the point in the season where all of a sudden there are injuries everywhere. And when you get those injuries, now what do you do, right? I mean, there's obviously an answer to that question, which is you better go out and see if there's anybody out there in free agency that you can get, or can you make a trade? So I just wanted to go through a few that I find really interesting, because the wide receivers, just the wide receivers, John, you've got Devontae Adams. He was with the Raiders. The Jets said, we got to get this guy. We need him as part of our team. I guess it really was Aaron Rodgers. Let's be honest. Nobody else. Who else is running the team? It's Aaron Rodgers. So he got him to the Jets. Then you've got Amari Cooper. He was with the Browns. The Browns are clowns. They don't have a quarterback. They got the most expensive guy to sit on the sidelines and mope that I've ever seen. But you've got Amari Cooper leaving the Browns, and he gets traded to the Buffalo Bills. He's pretty excited about that. A playoff-type team. He's got a great quarterback, right? So he's pretty happy. DeAndre Hopkins is next. Tennessee going to Kansas City. Well, what are you doing? Matter of fact, you're leaving Tennessee, one of the worst teams in the AFC, to Kansas City, who right now is undefeated and the best team in the AFC. Not such a bad thing for him, John. And then the Buccaneers, they got Godwin is out. They've got Evans is out. They need to get somebody. They haven't done it yet. How about the 49ers? They have been hit so hard at the receiver. Right now, Debo, Ayuk, Jennings, Chris Conley, all gone. All of them. None of them's around. Some of them will come back. Not all of them. Some of them are going to be gone for a while, at least the season. So I was just interested to see, what do you think? I mean, we talked about this last year too, the injuries in the NFL and the mounting injuries. And I still stand by what I've said in the past, John. They don't practice right. They don't have full equipment on. They just kind of walk through things because they're worried about guys getting hurt. They better start worrying about why they're getting hurt during games, is probably because they're not giving them the proper practice. To this day, John, I can't remember the exact number, but I think they have 20 full padded practices for the entire year, including training camp, where you're in full pads. That's a mistake, and they think they're doing something right. I think it's hurting the players.
Yeah, I think putting those soft helmets on top of the ones that cushion blows to the head that could accidentally happen in a practice, because you're not really going very full speed in practice, but you need to get game ready. I agree with you, Pete. And one coach that understands that better than any, I think, better even than Andy Reid, is Campbell up there in Detroit. And he tells the guys, he says, look, if I didn't have to do this, guys, we wouldn't do any contact. He said, if I thought we could win without it, we wouldn't do it, but we need it. And take a look at his injury report, Pete, versus some of these other teams, again, like San Francisco and so forth, where you've got so many guys out. I'm surprised they haven't tapped some of these receivers, Pete, because I know you're talking about DeAndre Hopkins as well as Devontae Adams. There were people out there that San Francisco could have got. San Francisco's slipping. They're one of the teams that perhaps it's either bad luck, Pete, bad turf that they're practicing on and playing on, or they just didn't get enough live contact. And we'll find out, I guess, whether they have enough juice left in the tank. But this is a team that was obviously, Super Bowl team last year. Yeah. And right now it looks like 3 or 4 teams in the NFC could take them out.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's becoming a problem, and they've got to address it maybe in the offseason. Hopefully they do. All right, next up, we're at NCAA football, John. This is fun because I'm looking at the SEC, and I don't think everybody always diagnoses the way I do, but I was looking at this and I was thinking to myself, wow, if you would have told me we're 6 or 7 weeks into the season, and who's the very top of the SEC? Is it Georgia? Is it Texas? Is it Alabama? Is it Tennessee? Oh, Ole Miss, they're loaded. Lane Kiffin's done an unbelievable job. No, the answer is no. The 2 undefeated teams right now in conference undefeated is LSU and Texas A&M, and one of them is going to have a loss because they play this weekend, which, by the way, that's a game that everybody should want to watch because LSU lost game week 1. I can't remember if A&M was week 1 as well, but they might have been. But as far as conference play goes in the SEC itself, 3-0, 4-0. So they're going to be going at it, John. It should be pretty interesting. And as I say, now a lot of one-loss teams in the SEC. You've got Georgia, Texas, Mizzou. You've got Tennessee. All of them have 1 loss. Bama's got 2. But it makes it very interesting, very, very interesting, I think, to see that the SEC itself, because of everything we talked about yesterday, because of the portal, maybe you could throw in a little NIL. I don't even think that matters. They all have money down at the SEC, so that's not really a deal. But I will say this as well, John. I got one guy for the Heisman I'd like to throw out to you because he's not a name. Nobody knows him because Clemson lost week 1, right? But Clemson has won every game since. They've got a quarterback there named Klubnik who's got 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's run for 4 touchdowns. I would say this guy is somebody that when you look at Clemson and they're starting to move right back up into the polls, they're in the top 10. I think they're around an 8 or a 9, depending on what poll you look at. But this is a football team that suddenly under Dabo Swinney, I love that guy. He doesn't like the portal. A lot of people hate him for that. But you know what? Right now he's put it in their face because they're sitting in a pretty spot, and that football team is playing well, and his quarterback looks like a Heisman candidate.
Yeah, Cade Klubnik or something like that,
Yep.
Pete.
Yeah.
Cade, all he did was throw for like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns or something like that against Virginia. So it wasn't exactly a slouch team. Yeah, they look really good, Pete. And he is, as much as anything, they always have great defense at Clemson. I'm always surprised if they don't, because since you played a few years ago, they've had great defensive teams. And I know you beat them in the Independence Bowl, the University of Minnesota did, but they are always in the running, it seems, in the ACC and so forth, Pete. And I think that is a great football team. And you and I are both big fans of Dabo Swinney. So this is one that if you get a chance, Pete already said LSU, Texas A&M, if you get a chance to watch a Clemson game, you won't be disappointed, folks. You will come away thinking this kid might be the next player out of that conference that goes in the top 5, top 10 picks.
Yeah. He's having a great year. It's really exciting. I love it. They had the Fridge's brother when I was playing against Clemson, John. That was kind of fun too. But, just an unbelievable team, really well coached. And you know what? I'm proud of the way they bounced back because I got a lot of friends down there. My daughter almost went to school down there, and it's a place that we feel very comfortable when we've been down there as well. I had a lot of buddies of mine that I played with from Clemson. So, hats off to what they did because opening week didn't work for them at all. They had a terrible start. But ever since then, they've just been plowing through people. So congrats to them. And I think this kid, Cade, has a really, really good shot at the Heisman if he can keep this up because 3 interceptions, really, as many passes as this guy's thrown. He's got 3 interceptions. They're doing something right.
Yep. Well, Pete and I are going to try to do something right on Liz Clayman's show later today, folks. So 3 p.m. Eastern time today, Pete and I will be on with Liz Clayman. She will also be speaking at our event in Florida on the 19th of November. That's the rescheduled mastermind event. She will be there. Grant Cardone, who you see on the picture there, will be there. Charlie Gasparino, Larry McDonald, so many great speakers all day live trading. The Rebel Mastermind, you can scan that QR code there and join us. But we will be on with the lovely Liz Clayman breaking down some great election plays, macro, as well as our best plays for the day in terms of trading. So make sure you tune in. Fox Business, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Pete and I will be back tomorrow at 1. See you then, folks.